Greetings, Manna 3301 students, and welcome to our first video in response to discussion board question number 1. There was some fantastic responses out there as to the question of, what do you consider to be a good manager? What traits do you see? Leading and directing and planning are all things that the text says, but that's really not necessarily in line with what people experience day in and day out in management. So I wanted to kind of give you my 2 cents worth as to how I would respond to that question, just to give you a feel for, something I might have said in a lecture had we been in a regular classroom situation. My normal response to that particular question about what takes to be a good manager is usually in relationship to or deals with manager's ability to manage relationships. Now, when you're a manager, you've got relationships in a 360-degree circle. You've got people who you are accountable to, your superiors, and you need to build solid relationships with them so that you know how to pass on the objectives that they've established for you to your team. You've also got relationships with vendors and with customers, and those are kind of side to side and sometimes downward relationships, in that you are responsible for the success of those relationships, from the people that provide the materials that your department needs to the ones that are actually taking on your product. For service related project, it may be external customers, it may be internal customers. It just depends upon the circumstance of your actual organizational structure and your role. But all of us have customers, people who partake of the work that we produce. And then, of course, the downward relationship as a manager are those people that have people who report to you, your subordinates. You've got to clearly be able to communicate the objectives that make up the things that they do day in and day out for their role. Most of the time in my career, especially as a human resources consultant, I find that managers are too busy dealing with the tactical aspects of their department to really build relationships and appropriately delegate work to their subordinates for the purpose of being able to hand off an objective to them. Oftentimes this ends up manifesting itself in poor development of skills or productivity on the employee's part. And I often refer to that as managers being too busy doing their job to do their job. When you're a manager, part of your responsibility is to make sure that the people underneath you are equipped to be successful, not just the appropriate level of output of the work, but also the growth of them as a professional individual. Either an improvement of their skills, an improvement of their productivity, and anything that we might want to measure is their output for advancement in the company. So there's a very strong relationship that needs to be managed and dealt with as a manager to your subordinates. By the same token, you need to have that same communicative flow of information back and forth with your boss. What is it that I need to do as a manager to meet my objectives? More than just the productivity of my department and more than just the output, but develop myself as a manager. And your manager or supervisor should be a part of that discussion. But for that to be rich communication, there has to be a relationship. Now, individually as managers, I think some of the traits that are important as a manager is that a manager must have integrity. The scripture says that let your yes be yes and your no be no. There's no necessary to wonder whether or not something I tell one person is going to be trusted as the truth and what I will actually do. Now, circumstances change, and sometimes comments or responses at one time may be subject to edit or revision because of circumstance. And that's fine, because the second part of being a good manager is humility enough to be able to go back and make those edits and make sure that everybody comes out with their dignity and respect intact. So integrity and humility are two very strong characteristics that I think need to be present in a good manager. Well, I hope this gained a little bit of insight as to what a good manager is. Like I said in the introduction, we're going to try to have one of these videos every week in response to the discussion board questions, a little bit so that you'll know my heart and just sort of what I would be sharing with you if we were in a classroom face-to-face a couple times a week in the discussions that we would have. I welcome hearing from you and learning a little bit more about what you're experiencing, through the class, through emails or phone calls. And I look forward to the discussion board responses that are here in the weeks to come. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you next time.